Mafia boss defended elderly woman insulted by driver. What he did surprised everyone. It was a bright and sunny afternoon in downtown Chicago when Margaret Hayes, a woman in her 70s, stood waiting in the parking lot of a busy shopping mall. The old red car she drove had seen better days, but it still ran, barely. Margaret had worked her whole life as a housekeeper, doing everything she could to make ends meet. This trip was an ordinary errand, just picking up groceries and running a few small errands. But it quickly turned into a moment that would change everything for her. As she carefully backed out of the parking space, a black SUV sped past her, honking its horn aggressively. She barely had time to react when the driver, a young man in a sleek suit, leaned out the window and shouted at her. "Hey, old lady, watch where you're going. You almost hit my car." The insult was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, and Margaret, already exhausted and frail from years of hard work, froze. She could feel the eyes of passers-by on her, judging her as she stood there, stunned. The driver's voice grew louder as he leaned out even further. "What's wrong with you? Are you too old to drive?" He laughed, making a spectacle of her. Margaret's hands trembled, and her heart sank. She had been insulted before, but never so publicly. Just when she thought the humiliation couldn't get any worse, the man's words hit her like a punch. "Get off the road, you don't belong here." He laughed again, and his friends in the car joined in, mocking her. Tears stung at the corners of Margaret's eyes, but she didn't dare show weakness. She kept her head down, trying to ignore the laughter, but the sting of his words lingered. As she stood there, her heart aching, something unexpected happened. The sound of a car engine revved in the distance, and a sleek, black luxury sedan pulled up. The door opened, and out stepped a tall, imposing figure dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. The crowd parted as he walked with purpose toward the scene. Margaret barely noticed, still too humiliated to look up. But then, she heard a voice, deep, commanding, and unmistakable. "What's going on here?" The voice came from the man in the suit, his gaze fixed on the young driver, who suddenly looked nervous. The driver opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat as the man took a step forward. He didn't flinch, not for a second. "I don't think you understand who you're talking to," the man said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The young driver backed away, his confidence crumbling under the weight of the stranger's presence. Margaret looked up in surprise, but the man's gaze was fixed firmly on the driver. "Apologize to her," he said coldly. The driver stammered, glancing around at his friends, unsure of what to do. I'm sorry," he muttered, his voice barely audible. The man didn't take his eyes off him. "Say it again," he demanded. "I'm sorry," the driver repeated, now visibly shaken. The man turned to Margaret and nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Are you okay?" he asked. Margaret couldn't believe it. This man, a complete stranger, had come to her defense in a way she never expected. Her heart fluttered with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. The man didn't wait for her response. "You," he said, pointing at the driver, "will make sure she's treated with respect, or I'll make sure your job here is over." The driver, now pale, nodded quickly and turned to walk away. The man watched him leave, then turned back to Margaret, his face still unreadable. He offered her a small, reassuring smile. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he said, his tone genuine. Margaret, still in shock, finally managed a weak smile. She wasn't used to this kind of kindness, especially not from someone so powerful. The man gave her a brief nod before returning to his car. As he got into the driver's seat, he looked back at her one last time. "Take care," he said, before driving off. Margaret stood there, still trying to process what had just happened. Her heart raced as she realized that for the first time in a long while, she had been treated with dignity, not as an invisible, ignored person, but as someone worthy of respect. What happened next would change Margaret's life in ways she could never have imagined. After the unexpected intervention of the mysterious man, Margaret stood frozen, still processing what had just happened. She had been humiliated just moments ago, but now, the very man who had defended her, the one who had stood up to the rude driver, was gone. The luxury car was already speeding away, leaving her alone in the parking lot, surrounded by curious onlookers. Margaret, still shaken, made her way to her old car. Her hands trembled as she started the engine, but she was no longer feeling the weight of shame that had burdened her moments earlier. For the first time in a long while, someone had shown her respect, and it had left her speechless. The rest of the day felt surreal. Margaret went through her usual errands, but the events of the parking lot replayed in her mind over and over again. Who was that man? What had motivated him to step in like that? Why did he care? The questions lingered in her mind as she returned home to her small, modest apartment. Later that night, as she sat down for a simple dinner of soup and bread, Margaret's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and was surprised to see an unfamiliar number. Hesitant, she picked up. "Hello," she answered. "Hello, is this Margaret Hayes?" The voice on the other end asked. "Yes, this is she. This is Dominic Castellano. I hope I'm not disturbing you." Margaret froze at the name. Castellano. That was the last name of the man who had come to her aid earlier that day, the same man who had defended her with such authority. I didn't expect to hear from you," Margaret stammered. Dominic's voice was calm, smooth, with a hint of authority that Margaret instantly recognized. "I wanted to make sure you were all right after what happened today. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I trust the driver didn't cause you any further trouble." Margaret could hardly believe her ears. He was calling to check on her? The kindness she had felt earlier began to swell in her chest once more. I'm fine," she said, her voice still filled with disbelief. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Dominic replied. "I just wanted to ensure you were treated with the respect you deserve. Nobody should ever make you feel less than. You've worked too hard for too long to be treated like that." Margaret's heart swelled with emotion. She had never heard anyone speak to her with such sincerity, especially not someone with so much power. It made her wonder if she had misjudged people like him all her life. I don't know how to thank you," Margaret said softly. "I'm just a woman, trying to make it on my own. I never expected anyone to stand up for me like that." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Then Dominic spoke again, his tone now gentler. "It's no problem. I'm glad I could help. I know it's not much, but I want you to know that if you ever need anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out." Margaret's breath caught in her throat. What was he saying? "What do you mean?" she asked, still confused. "I mean, if you ever find yourself in need of assistance, whether it's financial or anything else, you can call me," Dominic replied. "I've seen too many people work their entire lives without ever being given a chance. You deserve better." Margaret didn't know how to respond. She had lived her whole life without asking for help, never thinking she deserved more than the scraps life had given her. But here was this man, offering to change that, offering to help her in ways she never thought possible. I don't know if I can accept that," she said, her voice trembling. Dominic's reply was soft but firm. "You don't have to accept anything right now, but know that the offer is there. I want to make sure you have the support you need. And if nothing else, you have a friend in me, Margaret." Margaret was silent for a long moment, taking in his words. This was more than just a kind gesture. This was someone who genuinely cared. Finally, she spoke. Thank you. Thank you so much. I never expected this, but I won't forget it." "You don't need to thank me," Dominic said, his voice warm. "I'll be in touch soon. Take care of yourself, Margaret." After he hung up, Margaret sat there for a while, staring at the phone in her hand. Her mind was racing. What had just happened? She had gone from being humiliated in a parking lot to receiving a call from a powerful man who genuinely seemed to want to help her. She felt a mix of gratitude and confusion, unsure of what to make of it all. But one thing was clear. Her life had just changed, in a way she could never have imagined. The events of that afternoon had set in motion something much larger, and Margaret had no idea where it would lead her. But for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. The next few days passed in a blur for Margaret. She tried to go about her usual routine, but she couldn't stop thinking about the call from Dominic Castellano. Every time her phone rang, her heart skipped a beat, expecting it to be him. She hadn't expected that a single moment of kindness could affect her so deeply. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope, a belief that maybe things could be different. Maybe she could have more than just survival. But still, she didn't know what to make of Dominic's offer. Was he simply being kind, or was there something more to it? She couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change, and not just because of the call. She had learned to stay in her lane, to keep her head down and do her work without causing any waves. But here was a man offering her something she never thought she deserved: respect, recognition, help. It was hard for Margaret to believe that someone like him could genuinely care for someone like her. She spent the next few days in a daze, unsure of what to do with herself. She didn't reach out to Dominic, even though she felt like she should. Instead, she focused on her work, cleaning the homes of people who barely acknowledged her existence, just like always. But as she wiped down countertops and polished silverware, her mind kept drifting back to the conversation. Was she really ready to accept help from someone so powerful? A week later, as Margaret sat in her small living room, a knock at the door startled her. She stood up quickly, wondering who it could be at this hour. She opened the door, and to her surprise, standing there was a well-dressed young man with a briefcase in hand. He smiled politely. "Ms. Hayes," he asked. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "I'm Michael, Mr. Castellano's assistant," he said. "He's asked me to come by and make sure everything is okay. He mentioned you might need some help with something." Margaret's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected someone to actually show up. I'm fine," she said quickly, though she wasn't sure if she was convincing him or herself. Michael didn't seem convinced. "Mr. Castellano just wants to make sure you're taken care of. He knows how difficult things can be, and he really believes you deserve better." Margaret swallowed hard. She hadn't known what to expect when she'd received that call, but this felt real. It felt like the world was shifting around her, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. "I appreciate the offer," Margaret said, her voice shaky. "But I don't know if I can accept it." Michael smiled gently. "You don't have to decide anything right now, Ms. Hayes. Mr. Castellano just wants you to know that the offer is there whenever you need it. He understands if you're hesitant. But if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Margaret stood still, her mind racing. She was used to relying on herself. She had always been strong, independent, but now, she wasn't sure. Could she accept the kindness of a man who had everything? A man who could give her a life she never dreamed of? After Michael left, Margaret sat down, her thoughts a whirlwind. She had worked for years, struggling to get by, never asking for anything. She had always been invisible to those around her. But now, someone powerful, someone who didn't need anything from her, was offering her help. The weight of it all felt overwhelming. Over the next few days, Margaret didn't reach out to Dominic. Instead, she thought about his offer. She kept imagining what her life could be like if she accepted. The fear of change held her back, but the hope for something better tugged at her. She couldn't ignore the way his actions had made her feel. She had never felt that kind of respect from anyone, let alone a man with so much power. But as much as she wanted to reach out to him, she was afraid. Afraid of what accepting his help might mean, afraid of the unknown. Then, one evening, as she sat in her small apartment, she heard a car pull up outside. She looked out the window and saw a black sedan parked in front of her building. She recognized it immediately. Dominic's car. Her heart raced. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and went outside. As she stepped out into the chilly night air, she saw him. Dominic was standing by his car, his eyes scanning the area until they landed on her. He smiled warmly, and for the first time since their encounter, Margaret felt truly seen. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice soft. "I've been thinking about our conversation, and I wanted to make sure you knew that there's no pressure. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, whenever you're ready." Margaret stood there, uncertain. She had spent her whole life trying to survive, and now she was faced with a chance to thrive. Would she take it? Would she trust him, trust herself, and embrace the opportunity he was offering? The moment seemed to stretch on forever as she stood there, caught between fear and hope. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but unsure. I think I'm ready." Margaret's heart raced as she stood there in front of Dominic, still unsure of how to proceed. The moment had felt like something out of a dream, or maybe even a movie, but it was real. Dominic's presence was commanding, and his words carried weight. She had been a woman who struggled alone, never once asking for help, and now here she was, standing in front of a man offering her something that could change everything. The cool breeze brushed her face as Dominic stepped closer, his expression soft yet unwavering. "You're not alone anymore, Margaret," he said gently. "I want to help. I want to make sure you don't have to struggle anymore. But you have to let me in. Let me show you what's possible when someone cares." His voice was firm, but there was kindness in it, something that made Margaret's breath catch. For a moment, she hesitated. She thought of the years she had spent working tirelessly, doing everything herself, never asking for anything. She thought of how lonely it had been, how many nights she had fallen asleep wondering if things would ever get better. But now, Dominic was offering her something different, a chance, a hope. "I don't know how to accept this," Margaret whispered, her voice filled with uncertainty. Dominic looked at her with understanding, his eyes calm. "You don't have to decide everything right now. But know this, you've earned it. You've worked hard your whole life. You deserve to have someone by your side who cares about you. Let me be that person, if you'll allow me." His words were like a lifeline, and for the first time in a long time, Margaret didn't feel so alone. She had spent so many years convincing herself that she was fine, that she didn't need anyone. But now, with Dominic standing in front of her, offering something so simple yet so profound, care, attention, kindness, it was hard to ignore the tug in her heart. "I've been on my own for so long," Margaret said, her voice shaking slightly. "I've never known how to ask for help." Dominic smiled gently, taking a step closer. "You don't need to ask, Margaret. You just have to accept that you deserve help, that you're worth it. It's not about being weak. It's about letting others help you when you need it." Margaret nodded slowly, feeling a tear slip down her cheek. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. She wasn't used to people seeing her as more than just the woman who cleaned houses and did everything for everyone else. But here was Dominic, seeing her, truly seeing her, and offering her something she didn't even know she needed. "Thank you," Margaret whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Dominic nodded, his gaze softening. "I'm not going anywhere, Margaret. Whenever you're ready, you know where to find me. But for now, just know that you're not alone." He turned to leave, but stopped for a moment and looked back at her. "And Margaret?" She looked up, meeting his eyes. "You're stronger than you realize." With that, he got into his car and drove off, leaving Margaret standing in the night air, still trying to process everything. She watched the car disappear into the distance, her mind racing. What had just happened? Was she really ready for this change, for this new chapter in her life? But as the night grew darker, something inside her began to shift. Maybe it was time. Time to stop struggling on her own. Time to let someone else help her, to let someone else show her the care and respect she deserved. Over the next few days, Margaret allowed herself to think about what Dominic had said. She thought about the life she had lived, full of hard work, but also full of isolation. She thought about the love she had never experienced and the way people treated her as if she were invisible. But now, someone powerful, someone who had the ability to change her life, had seen her. He had seen her worth. And for the first time, Margaret began to believe in the possibility of something better. It wasn't easy for her to reach out, to accept help. But every day, she grew more certain that this was the right path. A path she had never considered before, but now, a path she felt ready to walk. As the days passed, Margaret made her decision. She would reach out to Dominic. She would take that first step, even though it was terrifying. For the first time in years, Margaret was ready to let someone in. And she had no idea where this journey would take her, but one thing was clear. Her life would never be the same again. A few days passed since Margaret's brief encounter with Dominic Castellano. As the days went on, she found herself thinking more and more about his offer, about the life she had lived and the possibility of something better. The simple life of working from sunup to sundown, barely scraping by, felt so far removed from the life Dominic had shown her. He had offered her not just money or support, but respect. He had made her feel like she mattered. She had always lived in the shadows, invisible to those around her. But now, she was finally being seen. Margaret sat in her small apartment one evening, contemplating the choices ahead of her. She hadn't reached out to Dominic yet, still unsure if she was ready to step into this new world. She thought of all the years she had spent alone, doing everything herself, thinking that asking for help was a weakness. But was it really weakness to accept help when it was offered with such sincerity? Was it wrong to want more, to allow herself to be treated with the respect she deserved? As she sat lost in thought, her phone rang. Margaret's heart skipped a beat when she saw the name on the caller ID. It was Dominic. She had been expecting this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. Hesitant, she answered the phone. "Hello," she said, her voice shaky. "Margaret," Dominic's voice came through, calm and warm. "I've been thinking about you. How are you holding up?" Margaret paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I'm fine, just trying to make sense of everything," she said quietly. "It's a lot to take in, all at once." Dominic's voice softened. I understand. You don't have to make any decisions right now. But I want you to know that I'm here, and when you're ready, we can talk more about how I can help. You've spent so much of your life taking care of others. Now, it's time for someone to take care of you. His words hit her hard, like a wave crashing over her. She had spent her entire life thinking she didn't deserve help, thinking that being strong meant doing everything on her own. But now, Dominic was offering something completely different. He was offering partnership, not charity. For the first time, Margaret realized that it wasn't weakness to ask for help. It was simply part of being human. She took a deep breath and steadied herself. Thank you, Dominic, she said, her voice growing more confident. I've been thinking about what you said, and I think I'm ready to take that step. Dominic was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was filled with warmth. I'm glad to hear that. You deserve more than just surviving. You deserve to thrive. After they hung up, Margaret felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had taken a step forward, out of the shadows and into the light. But there was still so much uncertainty. What would this new life look like? What kind of person would she become if she allowed herself to be helped, to be seen? The next day, Dominic's assistant, Michael, called to arrange a meeting. Margaret's heart raced as she prepared to meet with someone who could change her life forever. She had been so used to her quiet, solitary existence. But now, she was walking into a world she knew nothing about. She spent the day getting ready, choosing her clothes carefully, even though she knew it didn't matter much. This was about more than appearances. It was about stepping into a new chapter of her life. That afternoon, she found herself in a sleek office building in the heart of the city. Michael greeted her at the door with a polite smile and led her to a spacious office with a view of the skyline. It was all so different from the small, modest apartment she had lived in for years. Dominic is expecting you, Michael said, motioning toward the large desk where Dominic sat, looking every bit the powerful figure he was. He stood as Margaret entered, his gaze steady and confident. Margaret, I'm glad you came, he said, his voice warm but commanding. Margaret felt a surge of nervousness, but Dominic's presence was calming, and she found herself at ease in his company. Thank you for this, she said softly. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but now I'm here. Dominic nodded, his expression understanding. Taking the first step is always the hardest, but you've already made it. Now, let's see where this journey takes us. As they sat and talked about the future, Margaret felt a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in years. She had spent so much time surviving, but now, for the first time, she was starting to feel like she could finally live. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but she was no longer walking it alone. Dominic was offering her more than just financial support. He was offering her the chance to rebuild her life, to be the person she had always deserved to be. And for the first time in a long time, Margaret believed that maybe, just maybe, she was worth it. As the days passed, Margaret began to feel like her life was slowly falling into place. The uncertainty she had felt when she first met Dominic was still there, but it was beginning to fade. With each passing day, she found herself growing more comfortable in her new reality. She had never imagined that a man like Dominic Castellano, someone so powerful and influential, would take such an interest in her, someone as ordinary as herself. Yet here she was, being given opportunities she had never dreamed of. Margaret had spent years working for others, always doing her best, always being the quiet, invisible one. Now, for the first time, she was being treated like she mattered. A few weeks after her first meeting with Dominic, she found herself at a grand event, something she had never been a part of before. Dominic had invited her to attend a gala, one that was being held at one of the most luxurious venues in the city. The invitation had taken her by surprise. Margaret had never been to anything like it. She was nervous, unsure of what to wear or how to act in such a high-class setting. But Dominic had assured her that she was his guest, and she had nothing to worry about. The night of the gala arrived, and Margaret stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her dress. It was a simple but elegant black dress that Dominic's assistant, Michael, had helped her pick out. As she looked at herself, Margaret barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She had always been a woman of practicality, never thinking she could wear something so beautiful. But now, as she stood there, she realized how much she had changed. She had started to believe in herself again, to see herself as someone worthy of good things. When she arrived at the venue, Michael greeted her and guided her inside. The place was breathtaking, elegant chandeliers, marble floors, and walls adorned with exquisite art. It was a world that Margaret had never known, but one she was slowly becoming accustomed to. As she entered the grand hall, she felt a mixture of awe and intimidation. People in tuxedos and gowns mingled, their conversations a low hum in the background. Dominic spotted her across the room and made his way over, his presence commanding attention as always. When he reached her, he smiled warmly. "Margaret, you look stunning," he said, his voice sincere. Margaret felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Thank you, Dominic. I still can't believe I'm here." He chuckled softly. "You belong here, Margaret. You've earned every bit of it." As they moved through the crowd, Margaret couldn't help but notice the way people treated Dominic. Respect, admiration, and even fear. He was a man who commanded attention wherever he went. But with her, he was different. He was kind, considerate, and genuine. They spent the evening talking, laughing, and enjoying each other's company. For the first time in years, Margaret felt like she was truly enjoying herself. She didn't have to worry about the next paycheck or whether she could make ends meet. She was living in the moment, enjoying the life that had been offered to her. After the gala, Dominic offered to drive Margaret home. As they made their way through the city, Dominic turned to her. "You know, Margaret," he said, his tone thoughtful, "I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about how you've always taken care of yourself, never asking for help. But now, I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what." Margaret looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I never imagined I'd be in a position like this. I never thought someone would care enough to help me." Dominic smiled, his gaze softening. "Everyone deserves someone who believes in them, Margaret. You've worked your whole life to help others, but now it's time for you to let someone help you." As they drove through the city, Margaret realized something important. She had spent so much of her life doubting her worth, thinking that she didn't deserve the kindness others offered. But now, with Dominic by her side, she felt something she had never felt before: hope. The next few months flew by, and Margaret found herself growing into her new life. She continued to work, but she also started to take time for herself. Dominic's support gave her the confidence to pursue things she had never considered. She signed up for a local community college to take some courses, something she had always wanted to do but never thought possible. With Dominic's help, she found herself stepping into a new world, one where she didn't have to constantly struggle, where she could be herself and pursue her dreams. One evening, as they sat together at dinner, Margaret looked at Dominic and realized how much she had changed. "I can't thank you enough, Dominic," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You've changed my life in ways I never thought were possible." Dominic smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "You did the hard part, Margaret. You believed in yourself. Now it's time for you to take control of your future." As she sat there, feeling the weight of his words, Margaret realized that this was just the beginning. With Dominic's support, she was finally ready to live the life she had always dreamed of. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. And for the first time in her life, she truly believed that anything was possible. As the months went by, Margaret's life began to change, in ways she could never have imagined. She started to believe in herself again, something that had been hard for her after so many years of putting others before herself. With Dominic's support, she found new confidence. She signed up for classes at the community college, and though the coursework was challenging, she felt a sense of accomplishment every time she completed an assignment. But as much as Margaret was growing in her personal life, there was still an underlying fear. What if she wasn't truly deserving of all of this? What if it was all just temporary, a dream that would eventually end? As these thoughts swirled in her mind, Dominic continued to offer unwavering support. One evening, as they sat together in a cozy restaurant, Dominic looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "You've been doing well, Margaret. I'm proud of the way you've embraced everything that's come your way." Margaret smiled, though a small part of her still doubted whether she deserved his praise. "I just feel like I'm starting over. It's scary sometimes." Dominic leaned in slightly, his gaze softening. "It's okay to be scared. The most important thing is that you're trying. You've made so many strides, and you're becoming the person I always knew you could be." His words brought a sense of warmth to Margaret's chest. She had never felt this kind of validation, especially not from someone so powerful, so influential. In her old life, Compliments like this felt out of reach, like something reserved for other people. But now, for the first time, she could truly accept them. "I just wish I could believe in myself the way you believe in me," she said quietly. Dominic's smile grew. "You're already doing it. Every day you step out of your comfort zone. You're showing the world who you are and what you're capable of." The next day, Margaret received an invitation from Dominic to attend one of his business meetings. At first, she was hesitant. What did she know about business? But Dominic assured her that it would be a good opportunity to see his world and learn from it. She agreed, and soon found herself sitting in a sleek conference room, surrounded by high-powered executives and industry leaders. At first, Margaret felt completely out of place. The conversations were filled with jargon she didn't understand, and she felt like an outsider in this world of suits and power plays. But as the meeting went on, Dominic made sure to include her. He asked her opinions, listened to her thoughts, and treated her as an equal, despite the fact that she was new to all of this. Margaret was surprised at how much she was able to contribute. She had spent years in the background, never speaking up, never thinking her voice mattered. But now, she was being heard. Dominic's faith in her had pushed her to open up, and as the meeting continued, she realized that she was growing more confident with each passing moment. After the meeting, Dominic took her aside. "You did great today," he said, his voice genuine. "I know it was a lot to take in, but you handled it well. You're more than capable, Margaret." Margaret's heart swelled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't expect to feel so comfortable." "That's because you belong here," Dominic replied with a reassuring smile. "You're not just a guest in this world, you're a part of it." Margaret had always struggled with the idea of belonging, feeling like she didn't fit into the circles she was now a part of. But Dominic's words made her think differently. Maybe she did belong here. Maybe she had always belonged, and it had just taken someone to see her, to believe in her, to help her see it too. Over the next few weeks, Margaret continued to grow. She embraced the new opportunities that came her way, learning from Dominic and the people around him. But there was still one thing that lingered in the back of her mind, her past. The memories of her old life, the struggles, the loneliness, they still haunted her. She couldn't erase them, no matter how hard she tried. One evening, as she sat at home reflecting on her journey, Dominic called her. "Margaret," he said, his tone serious. "I've been thinking about something. I know how hard it's been for you to trust people, to open up. But I need you to know that you don't have to carry all of this alone. I'm here for you, every step of the way." Margaret felt a lump form in her throat. She had never had anyone offer that kind of support before, not in the way Dominic was. "I don't know how to let go of my past," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I've spent so many years just trying to survive. It's hard to believe that I deserve this life, this opportunity." Dominic's voice softened. "You don't have to let go of everything, Margaret. But you do deserve happiness. You deserve peace. And I'm here to help you get there. We'll face the past together, and together, we'll build the future you deserve." As she listened to Dominic's words, Margaret realized something important. She didn't have to carry the weight of her past alone anymore. She had someone in her corner now, someone who believed in her and was willing to help her face whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, Margaret felt ready to move forward. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Margaret felt different, in a way she couldn't fully describe. The changes in her life had been gradual, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place, but the shift inside her was undeniable. She was no longer the woman who lived in fear of not being enough, the woman who thought she had to earn her worth by carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. With Dominic's encouragement, she had begun to believe that she could stand tall, that she deserved to be seen, and most importantly, to be treated with respect. Yet, as she grew in confidence, she still felt a pull toward her past, the loneliness, the years of hard work that had left her feeling invisible. She had been taught to be self-sufficient, to never ask for help, and part of her still questioned whether it was right to lean on someone like Dominic. One afternoon, as she was studying for an upcoming exam, Dominic called her. His voice was familiar, a source of comfort now. "Margaret, I've been thinking about something," he said. "I know this might be sudden, but I want you to come with me to a meeting tomorrow. It's an important one. You've been doing so well, and I think it's time you start stepping into this world a little more. What do you think?" At first, she hesitated. She had never been part of the high-powered business world Dominic navigated with ease. But then, she realized how much she had grown. How many times had she been afraid to step outside her comfort zone? How many times had she held herself back because she didn't think she was capable? Dominic believed in her, and maybe it was time for her to start believing in herself. "I'll go," Margaret said, her voice steady. "I'm ready." The next day, Margaret found herself in a sleek, modern office building in the heart of the city. The glass walls reflected the sunlight, casting everything in a soft, golden glow. She had dressed in a modest, yet elegant outfit. Nothing extravagant, but enough to make her feel confident. As she stepped into the meeting room, she was greeted by a group of people dressed in sharp suits, all carrying the air of powerful professionals. Dominic was already there, his presence immediately commanding attention as he stood at the head of the table. "Margaret, I'm glad you could join us," he said, offering her a warm smile as he gestured for her to sit beside him. The other people in the room seemed surprised to see her, but Dominic's reassurance made her feel at ease. As the meeting began, Margaret stayed quiet at first, unsure of what to contribute. The discussions were fast-paced, full of complex terms and negotiations she didn't fully understand. But as the conversation continued, she found herself paying close attention, picking up on the flow of the discussion. There was something about the way people respected Dominic, how they listened to him, that made her realize she had the power to make an impact, too. As the meeting reached a pause, Dominic turned to her. "Margaret, do you have anything to add?" he asked. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Her heart raced, but Dominic's steady gaze gave her the courage to speak. "Actually," she began, her voice a little shaky but growing stronger as she continued, "I think there's something we could consider, something that could benefit all sides. If we make this adjustment, it might be a win-win situation." She wasn't sure where the words came from, but as she spoke, she realized she was no longer just a spectator in this world. She had something to contribute. Dominic looked at her with a proud smile. "That's exactly the kind of insight we need," he said. "I knew you'd bring something valuable to the table." The others nodded in agreement, and for the first time in a long time, Margaret felt like she belonged. The meeting ended with a handshake, and as the others left, Dominic turned to her. "You did great today, Margaret," he said. "I knew you had it in you." His words warmed her heart. She had always doubted herself, thinking she wasn't capable of succeeding in this world. But Dominic had been right. She had the skills, the intelligence, and the determination to thrive. As they left the building together, Margaret looked at him. "Thank you for believing in me," she said quietly. Dominic gave her a knowing smile. "You believed in yourself, too. I just helped you see it." In the weeks that followed, Margaret found herself getting more involved in the business world, gaining confidence, and taking on new responsibilities. She had started to see her worth, not just in Dominic's eyes, but in her own. She had been given the tools to change her life, and she was finally using them. But there was still one thing that hung in the back of her mind, the idea that she wasn't truly worthy of everything she had. She had spent so many years living in fear, afraid of failure, afraid of being seen for who she really was. Yet, with Dominic's help, she had been given the opportunity to live differently, to embrace her potential. It wasn't always easy, but every day, Margaret felt herself growing stronger, more confident, and more capable of facing whatever challenges came her way. And as she continued this journey, she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer just surviving. She was living. As the weeks passed, Margaret felt herself growing into a version of herself she hadn't recognized in years. She was no longer the invisible woman, the one who worked tirelessly in the background and never thought to ask for more. Now, she was beginning to find her voice, to believe that she had the right to stand up for herself, to speak out, and to ask for what she deserved. She had been learning so much, not just in the business world, but about herself, her own capabilities, and her worth. Every new challenge she faced, she met with determination, and though there were moments of doubt, they became fewer and farther between. She had started to believe in her own strength. But with all this growth came a new kind of pressure. As Margaret found herself thriving, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pulled between two worlds. One was the world she had known for so long, the world of modest living, of never having enough, of being invisible to most people. The other was the world she was now a part of, a world of luxury, of opportunity, of being seen and heard. It wasn't just about the money or the status. It was about the shift in how she saw herself. She was no longer just surviving. She was living. And yet, despite all the progress she had made, a part of her was still unsure if she truly belonged in this new world. One evening, as they sat together at dinner in one of Dominic's favorite restaurants, he could sense that something was bothering her. Margaret had been quieter than usual, lost in thought. "What's on your mind, Margaret?" Dominic asked, his voice gentle but direct. She hesitated, then looked at him, her heart heavy with the question she had been carrying for days. "I don't know if I belong here, Dominic. All of this." She gestured vaguely around the elegant setting. "It feels so different from the life I used to have. I've worked so hard for so long, and now, I'm in a world that's completely unfamiliar. I'm scared that I'll mess it all up." Dominic leaned forward, his eyes warm with understanding. "You belong here because you earned it, Margaret. You've worked hard, yes, but you've also grown. You've stepped up in ways that most people never do. This isn't just about the world you live in. It's about who you've become. I see that every day." His words were a balm to her soul, but her doubts lingered. "I'm afraid I'll wake up one day and realize it was all just a dream," she admitted. "That I don't deserve any of this." Dominic reached across the table and gently took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "You deserve every bit of it. You've earned your place here, Margaret. I didn't give you anything. I just gave you the chance to see what was always inside of you. You've always had this strength, this intelligence. You just needed someone to help you see it." Margaret felt a lump form in her throat. His faith in her, his belief that she truly deserved the life she was now living, was something she had never known before. It was the kind of support that allowed her to let go of her fears, to trust herself in a way she never had. "Thank you, Dominic," she said softly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." He smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "You wouldn't have needed me, Margaret. You were always enough. I just wanted to make sure you knew it." That evening, as they left the restaurant and walked through the city streets, Margaret felt a sense of peace wash over her. The fears that had plagued her for so long seemed to dissipate with each step. She had found something important that night, not just reassurance, but clarity. She was not just part of this world now. She had earned her place in it. As she stood there with Dominic, the man who had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself, Margaret knew that she was ready for whatever came next. She wasn't just playing along anymore. She was in control of her own future. She was ready to embrace it fully, to live without fear of being unworthy. The next day, Dominic invited her to a gathering of business leaders. Margaret wasn't sure what to expect, but she agreed. As they entered the high-rise building where the event was being held, she felt a familiar flutter of nervousness in her stomach. But as they walked into the room, Dominic by her side, she noticed something. She wasn't afraid anymore. The people here, the powerful figures, they weren't so different from her. They were just people who had taken risks, who had worked hard, who had made their mark. And Margaret knew that, with Dominic's help, she had the same potential. That evening, as the event came to an end, Dominic turned to her. "You were amazing tonight," he said, his voice proud. Margaret smiled, a sense of accomplishment filling her chest. "I was just being myself," she replied, realizing that for the first time, she truly believed it. The world was no longer something to fear. It was something she could conquer. And with Dominic's unwavering support, she knew she could face whatever came next with confidence and strength. In the weeks following her growing involvement in Dominic's world, Margaret found herself walking a line she never expected to navigate. Her confidence had increased, her sense of self was expanding, and yet there was a quiet storm building beneath the surface. With every new achievement, she felt pride, but with every new introduction to powerful people, she felt the familiar sting of doubt, trying to pull her back into the shadows she had lived in for so long. Dominic was aware of these inner battles, even when she did not voice them. He watched her carefully, offering guidance without pushing too hard, knowing the balance between encouragement and pressure was delicate. One afternoon, while they were reviewing documents in his office, he noticed the way she hesitated before asking a question, the slight tension in her shoulders as she tried to maintain control over her emotions. "You can ask me anything, Margaret," he said gently. She looked up, her eyes reflecting uncertainty. "Do you ever think," she began slowly, "that maybe I am not meant for this? That I am trying to fit into a world that was never built for someone like me. Dominic leaned back, studying her with a seriousness that made her heart race. No, he said firmly. I think you have worked harder than most people in this room ever have. You earned your place. You are not trying to fit into a world that does not want you. You are building your own space within it. His words felt grounding, like a weight lifting from her chest. But Margaret was not convinced yet. I know you believe in me, Dominic, she said. But I still struggle to believe in myself. I worry that people look at me and wonder why I am here. Dominic nodded, understanding completely. People judge what they do not understand. But they cannot take away what you have built. Remember that. Their conversation was interrupted when Michael, Dominic's assistant, knocked gently and entered with a troubled expression. Dominic, you need to see this, he said, handing him a tablet. Dominic's eyes narrowed as he read, and Margaret felt a wave of dread wash over her. She waited silently until he finally looked up. It is nothing you need to worry about, he said simply, but Margaret knew that tone. Something was wrong. Later that evening, after a dinner that felt unusually quiet, Margaret finally spoke up. Dominic, please tell me what is going on. He sighed, placing his glass down with care. Some people are questioning your involvement in my business dealings. They are suggesting you do not belong, that you are a distraction, that you were brought here for reasons other than your growth and potential. Margaret felt her throat tighten. Even though she feared hearing something like this, the reality still stung. So they think I am not good enough, she whispered. Dominic shook his head. No, they think they can decide who deserves success. They are wrong. He reached out, placing his hand gently on hers. You are here because you earned it. They will see that soon enough. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I do not want to be the reason people question you, Dominic. He looked at her with a kind of conviction she had never seen before. You are not the reason for anything negative in my life, Margaret. You are one of the few bright spots in it. His words left her speechless. The room felt still, the quiet thick with unspoken emotion. Margaret realized then that this journey was no longer only about proving her worth to herself. It was also about proving to others that dignity, resilience, and hard work could rise from any background. And she would not allow anyone to undermine that. When she left that night, stepping into the cool air outside, she felt something shift inside her. The doubt was still there, but it was no longer leading her. She was ready to fight for her place, not because Dominic wanted her there, but because she finally believed she deserved to be there. What she did not know was that the next decision she made would change her life, and Dominic's, forever. Over the next few months, Margaret's life began to take on a rhythm she hadn't known before. Every day felt like an opportunity, a chance to prove not just to others, but to herself, that she was more than the woman who had struggled in silence for so long. Dominic had opened doors for her, but now it was her turn to walk through them. She continued her studies, made new connections, and began to take more responsibility in the business world Dominic had introduced her to. Her days were filled with learning, growth, and moments of realization that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. But even with all this progress, there were still moments of doubt. Margaret sometimes wondered if she truly belonged in this world. She had come from such humble beginnings, and though Dominic's encouragement had lifted her, there was still a part of her that feared she was playing a role in a world that wasn't meant for people like her. She had been used to the shadows, to blending in, to not expecting more. It was hard to break free from those old beliefs. One evening, as they sat together at one of their favorite restaurants, Dominic could sense that something was off. Margaret was quieter than usual, her mind seemingly elsewhere. What's bothering you, Margaret? He asked, his voice gentle but firm. Margaret looked up at him, feeling the weight of her own thoughts. I don't know if I belong here, Dominic, she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I've worked so hard to get to this point, but sometimes I wonder if it's all just temporary. Like maybe one day, everything will come crashing down. Dominic leaned forward, his gaze steady. Margaret, you belong here because you've earned your place. It's not just about where you come from, it's about who you've become. You've proven yourself over and over again. You've taken every challenge and made it your own. Margaret shook her head. But I'm not like the people in these circles, Dominic. I don't have the same background, the same education. I didn't grow up with all these opportunities. Dominic smiled, his expression softening. You're right. You don't have the same background. But you've got something far more important, determination, heart, and the willingness to learn. That's what got you here. That's what sets you apart. His words were a balm to her anxious heart, but the doubt still lingered. She had worked so hard to get here, but it still felt like there was a piece of her that wasn't fully convinced she was worthy. I'm afraid, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm afraid that one day, people will see me for who I really am, that I'll never truly be accepted. Dominic reached across the table, gently taking her hand. Margaret, I've been watching you. You are more than enough. The people who truly matter, the people who respect you, see your worth. You don't have to prove anything to anyone but yourself. His words sank deep into her heart. She had spent so many years proving her worth to others, but for the first time, she realized that the only person she needed to prove it to was herself. Dominic's unwavering belief in her was the catalyst for a shift in her mindset. She had the power to shape her own future, and she didn't need anyone's permission to take up space in this world. The next day, as she sat down to prepare for an upcoming business meeting, Margaret felt a renewed sense of confidence. She wasn't just going to attend, she was going to participate, to speak up, to offer her ideas. She had spent too long sitting on the sidelines, too long allowing her fears to keep her from stepping into the life she truly deserved. When the meeting began, Margaret found herself listening intently, but this time, something was different. As the discussion progressed, she raised her hand, her voice calm but firm. Actually, she said, I think we should consider this approach instead. It could streamline the process and make things more efficient in the long run. The room went silent for a moment, and then one of the senior executives nodded thoughtfully. That's a solid idea, he said. Margaret felt a rush of pride as others chimed in, agreeing with her proposal. Dominic smiled from across the room, his gaze full of pride and encouragement. For the first time, Margaret felt like she truly belonged. She had something valuable to contribute, and her voice was being heard. As the meeting came to a close, Dominic pulled her aside. I'm proud of you, Margaret, he said. You spoke with confidence, and you took your place at the table. That's the kind of leader you're becoming. Margaret smiled, the weight of her doubts lifting. Thank you, Dominic, she said. I couldn't have done it without you. He gave her a reassuring smile. You did it because you were ready. Now, keep believing in yourself. You've earned this. As they walked out of the building together, Margaret felt a deep sense of peace. She had faced her fear, stepped into a world that once felt so foreign, and had made her mark. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, Margaret knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And the best part? She was just getting started. Over the next few weeks, Margaret continued to excel in the business world, but there was still one area of her life that felt out of reach. Despite all the progress she had made, she still found herself questioning her place in this new life. As much as Dominic believed in her, Margaret struggled with self-doubt, unsure whether she truly belonged in the world of luxury and high-powered business people. She often found herself feeling like an imposter, someone who had stumbled into a world that wasn't hers to occupy. One evening, as they sat together at a quiet bar after a long day of meetings, Dominic could sense her unease. What's on your mind, Margaret? He asked, his voice soft but knowing. She hesitated for a moment, then let out a deep breath. I don't know, Dominic. It's just, I feel like I don't belong here, she confessed. I don't think I'll ever truly fit into this world, no matter how hard I try. I wasn't raised in a world like this. I didn't have the connections, the background. I'm just an ordinary woman. Dominic reached across the table and gently placed his hand over hers. You're not just ordinary, Margaret. You've worked harder than anyone I know, and you've proven yourself time and time again. This world, this life, it's yours as much as anyone else's. Margaret shook her head, feeling the weight of her own insecurities. It's just hard to shake that feeling. The feeling that I don't belong, that I don't deserve this. I've always felt like I was just surviving, doing what I could to get by, and now everything's changed so much, and I don't know how to fully embrace it. Dominic's eyes softened as he listened to her. I know it's hard, Margaret, but let me tell you something. I've been where you are. I've had to fight for my place in this world. I wasn't always the person you see in front of you now. I know what it's like to doubt yourself, to feel like you don't belong. But you've shown the world who you are. And more importantly, you've shown yourself who you are. Margaret's heart raced at his words, but a part of her still couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. I've worked so hard, Dominic, she said quietly. But what if it's all temporary? What if one day, people see me for who I really am and realize that I don't belong in this world? Dominic gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Margaret, this is not temporary. You've earned every step of the way. This life you've built for yourself, it's yours, and it's not going anywhere. You have to believe that. There was a long silence between them as Margaret absorbed his words. She wanted to believe him, she really did, but the doubt still clung to her. I'll try, Dominic, she said softly. I'll try to believe it. Dominic smiled, his voice warm and confident. That's all I ask. But remember, you don't have to do this alone. I'm here with you, every step of the way. You have a place here, Margaret. And you always will. Over the next few weeks, Margaret started to take more risks, slowly pushing herself out of her comfort zone. She participated more in meetings, spoke up when she had an idea, and began to make her voice heard. Each time she took another step forward, the doubt inside her grew smaller. Slowly but surely, she started to feel like she was truly a part of this world. She was no longer just the woman standing on the sidelines. She was in the game. One day, as Margaret walked into a high-profile event hosted by Dominic, she noticed something that struck her. For the first time, she wasn't nervous. She wasn't second-guessing her place in the room. Instead, she walked with purpose, her head held high, her confidence growing with each step. The people at the event greeted her warmly, and as she mingled with the guests, Margaret realized something important. She had found her place. She was no longer the woman who felt like an outsider. She was someone who belonged. As the evening went on, Dominic found her in the crowd and smiled when he saw her. You're doing great, he said, his voice full of pride. Margaret smiled back, feeling a sense of accomplishment she hadn't known before. I think I'm finally starting to believe it, she said, her voice steady. I belong here. Dominic's eyes softened as he looked at her. I always knew you did. As the night continued, Margaret realized that this was just the beginning. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, and she was thriving. With Dominic's unwavering support and her own growing confidence, Margaret knew that she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. She had earned her place in this world, and nothing would take it from her. As the months passed, Margaret found herself in a place she had never imagined. She had come a long way from the woman who once felt invisible, overwhelmed by the weight of her own self-doubt. Every day, she embraced new challenges with more confidence than ever before. It wasn't always easy, but with each success, no matter how small, Margaret could feel the weight of her past fears lifting. She had begun to trust herself, to believe that the future she was building was one she had earned. And she was right. The moment she realized this was one of the most pivotal of her life. Margaret was at an important gala event hosted by Dominic. The grand ballroom sparkled with light, the sound of laughter and conversation filling the air. But for the first time since she had started walking this new path, Margaret felt completely at ease in her surroundings. She was no longer an outsider. She was a part of this world. As she looked around the room, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The woman she was now was someone who had worked tirelessly, learned from every mistake, and risen stronger every time. Her self-doubt, once a constant companion, now seemed like a distant memory. Dominic had played a huge part in that transformation, but in truth, it was Margaret's own resilience that had led her to this point. She had made the decision to change her life, to push beyond the limits she had once set for herself, and now, here she was, standing in the midst of success. As she mingled with the guests, Margaret saw Dominic approaching. He flashed a smile that was both proud and kind. You're shining tonight, Margaret, he said, his voice full of admiration. She smiled back, feeling a surge of gratitude for the man who had helped her believe in herself. Thank you, Dominic. I never thought I'd be here, doing this, but it's real now. I feel like I finally belong. Dominic's smile deepened. You always belonged here. You just needed to believe it. And now you do. The conversation turned to other guests, but Margaret's mind lingered on his words. She hadn't just earned her place. In this world, she had created it. Every decision, every step she had taken had led her to this point. She hadn't waited for permission. She had taken the reins of her own life. Later that evening, as the event came to a close, Dominic pulled her aside once more. I want to show you something, he said, leading her to a private area where the two could speak uninterrupted. He looked at her, his expression serious yet gentle. Margaret, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. Margaret raised an eyebrow, curious. What is it? Dominic paused for a moment, then spoke softly. I've been through a lot in my life, and I've seen many people come and go. But you, he said, his eyes locking onto hers. You've changed the way I see things. You've taught me more about strength, resilience, and grace than I ever thought possible. Margaret felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. Dominic, I don't know what to say. I've learned so much from you. You've given me the chance to see what I'm capable of. He shook his head. No, Margaret. You had it in you all along. I just helped you recognize it. She smiled, her heart full. For the first time in her life, Margaret felt like she was truly in control of her own future. She had come so far, not because of luck, but because of her own hard work and determination. She wasn't the same person who had walked into Dominic's world all those months ago. She was someone who had created her own success. And that was something no one could take away from her. As they stood there, looking out over the city, Margaret realized that her journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges, new opportunities, and new moments of doubt. But now, she had the tools to face them. She knew who she was, and she knew that no matter what happened next, she was ready for it. Thank you, Dominic, Margaret said softly. For everything. Dominic smiled warmly. You don't need to thank me. You did all the hard work. I'm just proud to have been a part of it. The two of them stood there for a moment longer, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Margaret had learned to trust herself, to believe in her own strength, and to accept the success she had fought so hard to achieve. And as she looked ahead, she knew that this was only the beginning. The best was yet to come.